Welcome to this episode of the Psychedelic Mom podcast. I'm your host, Michaela Carlin, and welcome to this episode about magic mushrooms. One of the questions I get most asked about when it comes to particular psychedelic medicines is psilocybin mushrooms. And I kind of wonder whether it's because many people believe that psilocybin mushrooms, as far as a psychedelic goes, it's one of the maybe easiest access points, what I hear often. And they grow everywhere, and many different people have access to these mushrooms. So I also get the most people reaching out and telling me their profound experiences and healing journeys with psilocybin mushrooms. So, what I thought I would do today is answer a lot of the questions that I get asked about psilocybin mushrooms. What does it look like to do a one-on-one therapeutic journey? What is a group journey like? Are psilocybin mushrooms safe? Where are they legal? Why would someone do a psilocybin mushroom? And a little bit about the history of when did these psilocybin mushrooms begin to be used in our culture? So, welcome to this journey of magic mushrooms. Before we begin, I want to say I am not a doctor and that this show is to be for entertainment purposes only. I do interview a lot of doctors and psychologists and pharmacologists on this podcast. But even still, you need to do your own homework. And this is not an endorsement of use of psychedelics, including psilocybin mushrooms, due to the complexity of these medicines, as well as the widespread illegality. So, jumping off right there, one of the top questions I get asked are, where can I get psilocybin mushrooms and are they legal? So let's just start with that question. Psilocybin mushrooms right now have been legalized in Colorado and Oregon. And other than that, there are different cities around the country that have also decriminalized them. So I know in Massachusetts, there's 3 or 4 cities: Cambridge, Somerville, Northampton, and Santa Cruz, California, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Michigan. So there are places where these medicines have been decriminalized. And there are many places around the world that people go if they want to go do a retreat with 4 or 5 people. There are retreat centers around the world that also offer psilocybin mushrooms retreats in the Netherlands and other places. So if you are looking to, in the United States, basically your options of doing a medicine like this legally is pretty slim still at this point. There's obviously underground facilitators that serve these medicines. There are clinical trials. And then other than that is in the states and cities that they have been legalized or decriminalized. So question number 2 that I get asked very often, are psilocybin mushrooms addictive and are they safe? So in looking at this question, I brought out this study done in Britain, and it was a study that looked at 100 of the most used recreational drugs globally. They were looking at alcohol, heroin, psilocybin mushrooms, MDMA, these different drugs to determine their harm. And when they were looking at harm, they were looking at the harm to the individual who consumed the drug, and the harm to their family and society. So believe it or not, the drug that causes the most harm to the individual, to society, and to families is alcohol. Below alcohol, number 2 was heroin, and under heroin, what all the way down at the very bottom of the list of 100 drugs was psilocybin. They were looking at whether the drug was addictive, whether it caused harm, what was it doing to the brain, the body biologically, what does it do to somebody physiologically as well as emotionally outside the individual and harm to others. They were looking at, does this person end up in jail? Do they lose their tangibles, meaning their home, their job, their car? And what was happening relationally for these people? If someone drinks alcohol and has a problem with alcohol, is it addictive? And if it is addictive, what happens to families in that and what's happening to society? So, taking that particular study, again, psilocybin mushrooms were at the bottom. Psilocybin mushrooms are not addictive. And not only are they non addictive, they actually help with addiction. There's a lot of evidence that shows the use of psilocybin mushrooms from a micro to a low to a therapeutic dose actually really helps with repatterning the brain and its addictive patterning. There's another study where they gave mice cocaine and different drugs. When they gave them psilocybin mushrooms, the mice never went back for a second dose. So there isn't this addictive quality to mushrooms that other drugs have. Another question, can you overdose? So that is also looked at in these studies of safety. Can you overdose on these medicines? Psilocybin mushrooms, it is virtually impossible. I was reading that it would take about 200 grams of mushrooms to overdose. And just to give you a perspective, a microdose is zero point 0.1 gram, a heroic dose is 5 grams. So you'd have to take 200 grams of mushrooms to overdose. And I think what would happen prior to you overdosing is your body would respond in some way that you might, purge it out. There is one or two things to note when it comes to the safety of psilocybin mushrooms, and that would be something called serotonin syndrome. Serotonin syndrome is very rare, but I do want to highlight all aspects of this. Serotonin syndrome is when two serotonergic medicines or drugs are taken together, and psilocybin is a serotonergic drug. So what that means is psilocybin works on the serotonin in the brain. And so if you take two drugs like that, so an SSRI or magic mushrooms or MDMA and magic mushrooms, there is a percentage of people that can get something called serotonin syndrome. Again, rare. The other thing I want to highlight on the safety of medicines and psychedelics, psilocybin mushrooms, when they looked at people that ended up in the hospital, psilocybin mushroom was 0.2% emergency room visits. So that's extremely low. And in going into even further looking at that, a lot of times it was that the psilocybin was taken with another medicine, or it was set in setting that caused someone harm and they ended up in an emergency room. A lot of psychedelics, including magic mushrooms, increase your heart rate and blood pressure initially when that medicine comes on. For most people, this is incredibly slight, but there are some people that have a certain type of heart disease that this could affect. So these are just things to note. And if you are ever working with somebody, whether that's going to a retreat or working with someone one-on-one or heading to one of the clinical trials, having someone who asks you for a health form, and on that health form, all of that information is gathered just to make sure that you're safe. As far as safety goes, another question that I get asked a lot is, are magic mushrooms safe for women who are nursing or pregnant? Are they safe to be used for a woman who's experiencing postpartum depression while nursing? So I have an episode about this with Dr. Ben Malcolm, who is known as the spirit pharmacist. And he really did an incredible job at looking at all the research out there to date about using different psychedelics for mothers. Basically, in a nutshell, you can check out that blog post that I have on my website on the psychedelicmom.com. But ultimately, in the end, we don't have enough research. There's not enough research done on women who are pregnant due to the risks to the fetus. I do receive a lot of experiential evidence from people reaching out saying that they microdosed, and microdosing helped during postpartum depression. And so as far as the safety goes, that's really something that you'd have to talk to your particular doctor about. And when we're looking at that, we're really looking at risk benefit. How severe is the postpartum depression? And Dr. Ben Malcolm points out that many cultures do use microdoses. For example, in Gabon, Africa, a small dose of iboga is given to women who are pregnant, maybe a little on the gums or a tiny dose. It's also given to babies, just like a tiny little dose. There's also evidence that the same thing happens at ayahuasca circles in different countries in the world. I have an episode with Shri Gadase, who spoke about her use of ayahuasca intentionally while she was pregnant with her daughter. So there are many different ideas about the use of earth medicines while pregnant and nursing. And luckily, the conversation is expanding more and more. And I think that women are really at the center of this conversation by really helping each other out and sharing their own experiences and data. There's an interview that I also did with Rebecca Crone. She started Plant Parenthood, and she holds psychedelic integration circles for mothers and fathers and caregivers of children to discuss all these topics around psychedelics. Next question. Why would somebody want to use a magic mushroom? So let's start with the fact that magic mushrooms are hallucinogenic drugs. It is the psilocybin within the magic mushroom, again, that is creating this altered state. So for the beginning of time, mankind has been interested in altered states. And psilocybin is no different. Many people enjoy experiencing themselves outside of their conscious awareness, including this default network that science refers to, this pattern within our brains, getting that offline to experience a reality different than our normal conscious wake reality. So, and why? Why are altered states so interesting? Throughout centuries, man and women have experienced altered states of consciousness to get to a deeper understanding of themselves, realms beyond our conscious realm. Some would say to access the mystical, the God realms. Some people say that taking a psilocybin mushroom helps them understand this reality better and connect to nature more. Mushrooms are the great decomposers on the planet and connectors. They connect through their mycelium web underground, are connecting all of nature. And some believe that a journey with psilocybin mushrooms is the same, that a deep connection not only to oneself, but to nature and all of humanity is experienced. And that mycelium network that looks kind of like the networks in our brain, that it's connecting all parts of our brain that otherwise do not connect. Michael Pollan, in his book, referred to the default network, that part of us that is constantly running our habituated thought patterns. And what psilocybin mushrooms do, as many other psychedelics do, is it has the ability to turn that off for a little bit, but not only turn it off, to begin to rewire the patterning and the neural networks in the brain. He described it like this. If you've ever cross-country skied, you know that the skis go into a track, and it's kind of hard to get off that track once the snow is piled up and you have these cross-country ski tracks. And it's not really till a new layer of snow gets put down that the skis can then kind of create a new pathway. Well, that's the analogy used, similar to taking a psychedelic, and what happens in the brain is that if our thinking patterns are going in the same pattern in the brain, that ultimately what a psychedelic can do is build new pathways. And what does that look like? Like, what does that feel like for somebody? What you'll hear is, wow, I've started to think different thoughts. I have access to different, even vocabulary, or something that I would have reacted to and would have been really angry about, had a totally different perspective on. So it really changes that pattern of thinking in the brain. So again, another reason why someone would use an earth medicine is to explore new ways of thinking, new ways of creating. Psilocybin mushrooms have been known to really expand one's capacity and creative mind. There's a lot of talk about Silicon Valley basically getting a lot of their ideas from microdosing things like psilocybin and LSD. If you looked at the brain on a psychedelic, including psilocybin mushrooms, what happens is it's all lit up. There's like new pathways, parts of the brain connecting and communicating with each other that typically don't. Another reason why someone would want to take psilocybin and an earth medicine and a psychedelic is because it can give us access to deep parts of ourselves that our conscious mind doesn't. So, for example, if we really think of who we are as a reflection of our past conditioning, all that has happened to us. Like if you look at yourself as the sum total of everything that you have ever experienced, all the inputs that you've had, your family, cultural, social, political, economic, all the systems that are around you, that they have formed you. They have formed your thinking, how you view yourself, how you view the world. And so what earth medicines and psychedelics do, it starts to peel back those layers so that you can choose for yourself who you want to be. Like you may say, wow, I just have this like temper and I'm like really reactionary. Well, taking an earth medicine would trace back, where did that begin? Why are you reactionary? Why do you feel like you go into like an aggressive type of pattern? And it would go back and it would show you where that very thing started in your life. And you would have the capacity to really look at it, take it apart with curiosity, compassion, and love to determine, how maybe at this stage of life, that kind of reaction doesn't serve you anymore. So that's really with anything, whether it's alcohol use disorder, any other addiction, eating disorders, ways of being that just don't serve you. Earth medicines, a medicine like psilocybin has the capacity to help you kind of reassess your life. But really what it does is it gives you access to those deep parts of yourself that your conscious mind doesn't have access to, hidden memories, traumas, and also helps you release the energetics held in the body. Basically, someone would want to take a psychedelic and a psilocybin mushroom for recreational use, for ceremonial use, and therapeutic use. And now many more people are microdosing. And microdosing, people are similarly looking for some of the same things, but trying to do that in a different way. So microdosing is taking a very small zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.5 grams of psilocybin mushrooms. It would be subperceptual, meaning you wouldn't feel it at all. And some of these goals are still the same. So it might be I'm suffering from depression. I have patterns of behavior that I'm trying to rewire. I'm really trying to engage in deeper creativity. My relational patterns, I'm having trouble. Maybe this will give me a deeper understanding of myself. Some people say it organizes their brain. So these are some of the reasons why someone would do psilocybin mushrooms. I often get asked about dose. How much would I take? Well, again, so let's look at microdosing. Microdosing is what I just said, zero point 0.1 milligrams to zero point 0.5 milligrams. You're not going to feel this. You should be able to drive, live your life on your day. James Fadiman in the West is kind of known as the one who came up with a microdosing protocol. Although, that being said, I heard an interview with the famous mycologist Paul Stamets, who said that, mushroom foraging has been happening forever, and that when people did forage, they would take a little bit of the mushroom. So people have been microdosing for a very long time. James Fadiman came up with an approach, and again, this proves that psilocybin mushrooms are non-addictive. And what magic mushrooms do is your body builds up a tolerance very quickly. So like James Fadiman approach to microdosing would be you would take a microdose on day 1, not on day 2, not on day 3, and again on day 4. Because if you do it any more than that, it's been shown that it doesn't have any benefit because your body builds up resistance. So a lot of people are using microdosing. That would be the dose for a microdose. A low mini dose would be anywhere from zero point 0.5 to 1 gram. And again, you're going to start to feel some of the effects of the hallucinogenic. Depends again on everybody's system, how you metabolize medicine, what variety of mushrooms it is. Variety of mushrooms have completely different feels to them. So you want to know when if you're thinking of taking a psilocybin mushroom, what variety you're taking and your intention, because that will have to do also with what variety you're going to take. There's a mushroom that's very common called penis envy. It is one of the strongest psilocybin mushrooms. Some people love it, so it's all individual. The variety that you use of a magic mushroom is also going to determine your experience. So then dose from there would be considered a low dose, 1 gram to 2 grams. And now basically what you're doing is you're just, again, increasing the hallucinogenic effects that you would have. You're definitely going to feel this. And up from there is what is considered a therapeutic dose. I would say a therapeutic dose is anywhere from 2 to 4.5 grams. And then a heroic dose would be 5 grams and up. So in the heroic dose area of 5 grams, some people would say that this is more of the ceremonial dose where someone is really, really leaving the ego behind, that there's much more of the ego and the default network offline. But the reality is the dose is so individual. So those are the doses of psilocybin mushrooms. Again, it's so individual. It has to do with the variety of medicine, your own way of metabolizing, and the intention that you have. Next question. What does it look like to go have a experience with a magic mushroom in a therapeutic setting? And how do I choose a facilitator and the cost and what are the potential outcomes? So, a therapeutic approach to taking an earth medicine and a psychedelic, including psilocybin mushrooms, is when your intention is to have somebody else with you. And your intention can be to explore your consciousness. Your intention can be, I want clarity, or I'm trying to heal from a trauma that I had. I was attacked, I have PTSD, and I want to heal from that. Or there's some things in my childhood that I feel are weighing on me at this stage of my life. Or I just don't even know, but I'm curious. My life is good or my life is just okay. It really has such a wide range of why people want to do a therapeutic experience. Number one is we all have such a deep desire to be witnessed and to go through an experience with somebody else. And if you're working with a therapist or a psychedelic guide or facilitator, they really know how to hold that space beautifully. They've been trained. And if you are going to ever have a therapeutic journey with somebody, my recommendation would be that you work with somebody who has a lot of experience with psychedelics themselves, that have used earth medicines and psychedelics to heal aspects of themselves, and they have served many people. I would say even that they might know something called IFS, which is internal family systems, that works really well alongside working with psychedelics, as well as somatic therapists and other different modalities going along with the psychedelic. The psychedelic in and of itself is an opening. It's a catalyst to change. So sitting with a guide or a therapist or a psychedelic facilitator, they're really trained to know dosage, what medicine would be best for you. They're watching everything in the session. They're checking in with you. Work with someone who contacts conversations beforehand about touch, about your preferences in music, and who sets a really safe container, who does calls before to prepare you. Preparation is so important. Some studies are showing the longer you prepare and the more calls you have, the better the journey is. That person is there to not only set a safe container, but there's different ways. There's people that combine kind of a ceremonial and therapeutic. So just know what you want, and yeah, find a guide that from the first moment you talk to them, you feel an implicit trust. One of the biggest things to know is that you don't know what's really going to come up. You may think you're going to know, but psilocybin, mushrooms, and many psychedelics can be really unpredictable. You might think you're going in for clarity, but the way that clarity comes may be very different than how you might think it would come. So if you are going to do a therapeutic journey with somebody, just find somebody who can hold everything. I'll have clients say, like, I'm worried I'll do this, I'll do this. And I always say, everything is welcome in my space. Like, everything is welcome: tears, grief, rage, not violence, and obviously not violence and anything sexually inappropriate. And other than that, they are here to be able to move and say and grieve and cry and laugh and dance and do whatever is needed for their healing journey. Basically, psilocybin mushrooms and other psychedelics have a deep, deep wisdom. I do not know how it happens. They seem to know the very place to go to release you or show you, illuminate something about what is hidden within your deep psyche that would offer you the most potential healing at this time. So when you work with a therapist, you can be working with one, so like triad, 2-on-1 or 1-on-1. And a lot of times you go in, there's eye mask, there's music, but really work with someone who will cater to you the best way that you want to approach this. There's research. There are retreat centers that do more small group, big group mushroom journeys. If that's something you're interested in, you can definitely find those out in the world. And then individuals use psilocybin to really get wisdom about their life, to ask for some insight on a path that they might need. Some people take psilocybin mushrooms and their entire life changes. It's like there's a study that's asked people after psilocybin mushrooms, where does this rank in the top events of your life? And it seems to rank within the top 5 of people's experiences. Psilocybin mushrooms are also used for end life, palliative care. John Hopkins did a study for 33 years using psilocybin mushrooms for people with cancer. And what they learned is it helped people not have the fear of death, helped them in their grief process and saying goodbye to relatives. Psilocybin mushrooms are also used for relational healing. So couples. MDMA is used a lot, but psilocybin mushrooms are as well, where a couple would come in and some of the deeper aspects of their relationship come to the surface. So then they can figure out better ways to communicate with each other and to determine what's actually happening in the energetics of that relationship. What are the unconscious agreements that are taking place? So psilocybin mushrooms can take you as an individual into the deepest aspects of yourself, and it can do the same for, a couple or families. Part of set and setting is what people call psychedelic integration. So I hinted on that a little bit. That is the preparation before. So that's having a conversation with whoever is going to be your guide. And hopefully they're already starting to get a sense of your system. How intact is that ego of yours? Is it a strong ego? Is that ego going to surrender during this journey? What is your ability to access the wisdom in your body? Many of us in the West are very disassociated from our bodies. So a good guide and psychedelic therapist, before you even come, might have you close your eyes and go into your body and see what's already there. Your deep psyche, before you do a medicine journey, starts to understand what's about to happen. So once you commit to doing medicine, I often say this, that once you commit to doing medicine, even let's say you schedule a medicine journey in a month, in that month leading up, your deep psyche is already giving you an indicator of what might come up through dreams, through body sensations, through thought patterns. So once you decide to do a psychedelic journey, whether that's therapeutically or with intention to do, even recreationally on your own with friends, you can start to open up with a deep curiosity in your psyche and ask that medicine to show you whatever it is that you need to be seen, needs to be seen. So there's the preparation, the calls before, the journey itself, and then the integration. Integration to me is one of the most important things because so much comes up in a journey. And when you begin to start to work with an earth medicine or a psychedelic, it can be super confusing. Because the wide range of experiences that you can have on a medicine, it can be euphoric. It can be totally like you are accessing grief you've never felt. It can be confusing. So it can be really anything. It can be laughter and joy. A lot of times you're going to contact many different things, repressed memories. And so one of the reasons why psychedelic integration is so important is it's like this psychedelic goes in and does this like psychic surgery. But in some ways, you can be left totally open. And so to have somebody that knows how to help you, if it's rewiring patterns of your thinking, if it is really healing a child part that came up to integrate that back into the wholeness of your system, if it's to discharge energy that is stored in the body from trauma, working with someone after the journey it can be so incredibly healing. In other cultures that hold space around earth medicine journeys so differently, where it's part of their culture, it's part of what they do. I was just hearing that there's a village that they have everybody come once a month to do a grief dance because they believe if you don't move your grief, you just are projecting it back onto other village members. So one of the reasons why integration is so important is in the West, we don't have many of these things. Finding community around psychedelics and doing this work is so important, but also having someone to help hold your journey in general, someone who's been on this path to help you move that grief, to maybe even connect you to other people who are on the path. So I highly recommend, if you are going to be using psychedelics for healing something, or even for expanding your consciousness, working with someone who has also been on that path, who can hold that space with neutrality and not project their ideas of spirituality onto you or their ideas about the medicine onto you. Someone that can hold that space in an incredibly neutral way. It's also incredibly important. So you are really in such a vulnerable place on medicine. There has definitely been, as in any industry, places where people didn't hold space safely. And there have been traumas within psychedelic spaces. So it's just really important to do your homework and find somebody that many people have had really good experiences with. I want to also highlight that find somebody that may have had some of the same traumas or experiences in life that you have had. If you have experienced racial trauma, sexual trauma, trauma in the LGBT community, just growing up in a heteronormative world, like if those are your experiences, find someone who can relate to that, who can help you on somebody who's kind of been on that path that then can help you and lead you on that path to healing as well. The historical use of psilocybin mushrooms. This one's a little tricky because more and more data comes out. There are cave drawings that are prehistoric cave drawings that have psilocybin mushrooms. There are some people that believe that even in Egypt, when in the pyramids, that there's drawings that look like psilocybin mushrooms and are kind of depicting something that is illuminating. Some believe that basically earth medicines are here to help us in the deep meta crises of our time, and that they have deep wisdom for each of us individually and collectively, that they are here because they want us to heal our great wounds, and they want us to be much more deeply connected as human beings to each other, to the earth, and to ourselves, and that they carry wisdom from some deep place that maybe humans don't even understand. If you want to check out some really interesting stories about people's experiences with psychedelics, I've done some really interesting shows of people that have had incredibly cathartic healing journeys with psilocybin mushrooms. Check out my interview with Jim Harris, who was a National Geographic photographer who became paralyzed on an expedition, and says that a small dose of psilocybin mushrooms taken at a concert fired up his leg muscles after 2 years. Tara Nichols says that microdosing psilocybin mushrooms helped her heal anorexia, and a disease that she said she never thought she would be out of the grips of. Tyson Adams says that psilocybin mushrooms helped him heal his porn addiction and have a deep understanding of what porn is doing to our culture. Dawn Foreman, who after a psilocybin journey saw how deeply disconnected and disassociated she was from her child and her husband, and how she was using her work to really separate herself and to stay emotionally distant from people. Last question. What is my personal experiences with psilocybin mushrooms, and how have they impacted my life? This is an incredibly difficult question to answer, honestly. Psilocybin mushrooms gave me a deeper understanding of who I am and why I am the way that I am, and also gave me a deeper understanding of choices that I have in my life. They helped me kind of unwind from patterns of behavior that were not serving me. I would say the deepest thing, and I can't attribute it necessarily to magic mushrooms, but psychedelics in general have helped me really step into my deeper voice, deeper knowing of who I am. I think as a woman that grew up as kind of a people pleaser, and someone who, as out there in the world that I am, and as engaged in my life that I have been since the time that I remember myself, there are also ways and patterns of behavior that, like all of us, that needed some tweaking and some work. And basically, what psilocybin mushrooms did is they brought me to my shadow. I think I was somebody who really loved, have always been someone who was like, thought the world was magic. Like would wake up in the morning and be like, do you see the morning dew? I mean, look at this beautiful world that we live in. I think I was someone who always fell in love with the moment of life, with poetry. Like Mary Oliver's poetry would be how I would say, like, I would see life, like why I wake early. And I always had that aspect to myself of finding the real joy in life. And I was someone who has always been pretty disciplined about health and wellness. But I think what psilocybin mushrooms have done, as well as other psychedelics, it give me a deeper understanding of what true wellness is. Our Western model of a green juice and yoga classes and driving to a workout class and, eating at Sweet Greens. These are really healthy things that I'm not downplaying as healthy aspects, but it's a bit of a Western version, I think, of what health is. And I think what psilocybin mushrooms do is they show kind of a deeper connection to oneself, to nature, and really kind of how you reevaluate what what true health really is. I'm still on this path, a path of true exploration of myself as a human being, who I am spiritually, emotionally, socially, physiologically, all the aspects of myself. So basically, psilocybin mushrooms have really, gosh, they've touched every area of my life. They brought me into what people call the shadow. And it wasn't comfortable. It was never comfortable for me with mushrooms. It was always pretty uncomfortable. And in that discomfort, other aspects of myself emerged. And it illuminated things that I obviously needed to see about myself, about my past, about my culture, so that I could show up differently in the world. And, my hope is to continue to work with earth medicines when needed and to continue to expand who I am and use these beautiful wisdom, use these beautiful fungi and other medicines to help me whenever needed. They helped me move grief that I didn't even know I had. I mean, I'm a mom of 4 kids, and anybody who has experienced raising children, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many, there's so much beauty, and you experience a lot. And as a woman, you hold a lot. As a woman in our culture, whether you have children or not, we hold a lot. And so I think, again, psilocybin mushrooms being the big decomposers, I think they have helped me decompose emotions that I just learned to stuff and helped me move them through my body, um, helped me see more aspects of myself that society wants women to amputate and suppress. This is the week where Sinead O'Connor died. And I'm looking at this woman who basically was radically open and honest. And it wasn't easy. When you are someone who speaks your mind, speaks about the deep traumas that she used her angsty voice, and really, she was a rage performer at times. She was amplifying the systems that weren't healthy. And I think what psilocybin and psychedelics do is they ask for that kind of truth, kind of truth to be amplified and not shut down. And, I just want to salute her for someone who had the bravery and courage to have a voice from a very, very, very young age. So ultimately, I think that's what psilocybin mushrooms do. They give you deep aspect of yourself, to find yourself, to have a deeper voice, to speak the truth the best that you can, and to engage fully in the experience of life, more fully. Yeah. So I hope this episode was helpful. Keep your questions coming, and I wish you well on this path. Reach out if you have had a psychedelic experience that changed your life. I love hearing about the wisdom that you experienced, but really how these medicines are saving your life. So reach out and connect with me and let me know any other questions that you have on this journey with psychedelics.